What's going on, mi gente? Just a couple days left until the conmebol qualifiers start. Let's get to it. What's going on, mi gente? Today, I am joined by someone that I had to pry away from, Lionel Messi, right? ESPN's own Luis Miguel Echegaray. What's going on, compa? How's it going?
Hold up. Messi's calling me, Diego. 1 second. Listen, Leo, cálmate, porfa. Okay, he hung up. It's fine. It's a pleasure to be here, man. I love, you know how much I love you and all the work that you do. Thank you for having me.
Man, it's crazy because we just finished a World Cup just a couple months ago, and now we are starting over for the 2026 World Cup. How exciting is this for you as a journalist?
It's exciting. It's a little weird because it feels like Qatar was only like a week ago, but it is exciting for a few reasons. One, obviously, as we're going to discuss, conmebol qualifiers are the most competitive, most entertaining, most dramatic, most circus-like, most telenovela-like qualifiers around the world. So, and both of us being Peruvian, obviously, we have that extra bias and personal attention to it. Obviously, we're in the arribaperú right here, so we'll talk about it in a second. So it's exciting. As a journalist, as a professional, it's also really thrilling because I do a weekly column. So this week's column on ESPN is going to be specifically about the South American qualifier. So it's all about getting the juices ready, of course, and the fact that it's for the 2026 World Cup, which in my opinion, I think it's going to be the ultimate party of the World Cup, right? The 48 team, 3 countries in 1 continent, the fact that the US is mainly hosting the big games, and 6.5 spots for CONMEBOL. So there's so many intricate factors that make this very entertaining. But as a Peruvian, Diego, as we all know, the nerves begin right now.
Absolutely. You already mentioned it. It's a new format, 48 teams in the World Cup, 6.5 spots to CONMEBOL. How does this change for Peru specifically, I guess you could say?
I don't know. It's a good question because on one side you could say, hey, 6.5 spots, right? So 5 get automatically in, and then the 6th one is for the intercontinental playoff. So you think, well, there's an extra added spot. Peru has been in this situation before, making it into that intercontinental spot twice in a row now. The first one in 2018 after 36 years making it to Russia. The second one, let's not talk about it, losing to Australia, blah, blah, blah. So obviously there's more spots. But here's the thing, Diego, and I know we're going to get into it. I don't know what we're going to see from Reynoso's Peru at this moment, because from the blueprint that we've seen ever since he took over, and obviously it's very difficult to take over after somebody like Ricardo Gareca, it's going to be intriguing because from the friendlies that we've seen, I wasn't too impressed with the Germany match. I was impressed with the Morocco one. But does that tell us everything? There's also the injuries that we'll talk about, the fact that La Padula is hurt and Guerrero's coming in. And it's a transitional Peru as well, you know, where there's young players coming in, which I'm very excited about, but we're still relying essentially on the older players. So there's a lot of question marks, proverbial question marks for the Peruvian national team, I think.
One of the biggest question marks for me has been about the squad, right? For example, you just mentioned he called up some youngsters, which I think is great because we need to start transitioning away from some of the older players, unfortunately. But you didn't call them up for the friendlies, and now you're calling them for the qualifiers. And I feel like you should have taken advantage of seeing them in the friendlies. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Spot on. I don't know what the strategy or the mentality was for Reynoso during the friendlies, but I'm trying to give him a little bit of leeway because I think that when you're a new manager, you don't want to change too much and you don't want to overturn too much. But I think to your point, there is no better time to introduce a young player to the national team and international competition than friendlies, especially friendlies away from Peru. So that worries me a little bit. But I think that because this is such a marathon-esque situation, right? We begin on September 2023, but it goes all the way up to 2026. Then, you know, or the ends of 2025, then I think it's okay to ease them into it, especially in CONMEBOL qualifiers, because okay, they may not have been involved in European, you know, friendlies, but they do know South American contingencies pretty well. Having said that, I'm intrigued to see what happens. I mean, there's a lot of young talent that I'm excited to see. Some are injured, of course, but yeah, man, it's just a big question mark. Listen, if you're somebody that's not proven and you're watching or listening to this, this is how we are bred to live, to just suffer throughout the entire time. So I'm a little bit worried.
I mean, there's that saying, right? If we don't suffer, then it really doesn't count.
Yeah, 100%.
There's the injuries, and there's the players that haven't made it to this final list against Paraguay and Brazil. I think most notably, there's Zambrano, Cristian Cueva, Brian Reina, who I think has been great as well. To me, the most important name out of that list is Cristian Cueva for what he's given to Peru. Not his club so much, but for Peru, especially with Ricardo Gareca and how important he's been. I don't see another player that can be or can give us exactly what he did during his time. I don't know if you think the same or if you think there's more importance to Cueva or not.
There is a great highlight of Luka Modric's beautiful outside of the foot pass to Vinicius Jr., I believe, last year, a year and a half ago, and everybody went nuts around Twitter, social media, etc. Oh my God, look at this. Cristian Cueva does it with his eyes closed, especially under Ricardo Gareca. So the reason why I begin with that sentiment is because I echo everything that you just said. There is nobody, definitely during the Gareca years, that was able to do what Cristian Cueva can single-handedly change games for you, specifically in South American qualifiers. Paulo Guerrero is a finisher and obviously one of the greatest players the Peruvian game has ever seen. But Cueva can change everything. That's the reason why, Aladino, and they call him a magician, because he does that. But there is so much off the field drama that goes on with him, personally, disciplinary wise. And I'm not here to speak ill of Cueva. I'm very grateful to everything he's given to the game. But I feel like Ricardo Gareca was able to put him in line, or at least make him focus so much. It's why Cueva called Gareca his second father in many ways, because he was so focused. And when you have a focus with Cristian Cueva, then magic happens. So to answer your question, the fact that he's not there right now is worrying. Is Piero Quispe the player that could maybe take on the reins? He has spoken in the past about how he looks up to Cueva, or looks down on him because he's a little taller than Cueva, but you know what I mean. but there are players specifically that maybe could be that kind of player. I mean, but no, that's a worrying sign, because he creates things out of nothing. But hey, this is what happens, man. Like, we're in a transitional period. We're moving on to the next stage, and Cueva or not, we need to make things happen, and we need to make things happen quick. We need to get points on the board. Especially, the biggest issue for Peru always has been away from home. Obviously, at home we have issues, but away from home really badly. That's why winning away at Colombia in the last qualifier was so significant. We need to do that, and it has to begin against Paraguay on Thursday night.
Juan Máximo Reynoso, his style, right? That we've seen, with his time at Puebla, then at León. No, was it León? Yes, León, and
yeah.
It for me, he's always seemed like a better club coach than a national team coach. I think because of the time that you have with your players. What are your sentiments to Juan Reynoso in his style of play and what he's bringing to Peru right now?
I don't know what his style is right now. Yeah. Because to your point, for those that don't know, Reynoso, one of the most important defenders Peru has ever had. And I feel like that's always been in his mind. He's always been somebody that really wants to focus on the stoic, resilient type of defensive unit, and then sort of counter, be physical. But, he does like to, encourage triangular passing and make sure that everybody's involved. But I haven't seen like a consistent blueprint of that. What was it? The first friendly against Mexico, I thought it was extremely defensive, which is fair enough. It was the first game. He was just feeling things out. And then we played against Central American competition after that. So with all due respect, you can't take too much away from what you saw there. I believe it was El Salvador or maybe Honduras. I can't remember, but it was a good win, but it didn't really teach us anything, and it was at Lima as well. So the Germany-Morocco ones is the one that I was really looking at more. Germany, obviously it's Germany, but I didn't see much of offensive grit there. And against Morocco, it was more holding on against a very good Moroccan side, of course. So right now, I don't know. And like you said, if we base it off his club football, then I guess you can take some solace in the fact that you can be very strong defensively off the ball, just rely on the counter, similar to some of the things that Gareca would implement. However, Gareca's most important, aside from the fact that he became manager, his most important contribution to the Peruvian national team was he gave Peruvian players like confidence to go forward, to do their thing. If Reynoso can do that, especially with the young players, then I'm feeling good. But Paraguay is also coming through a transitional period where young players are coming through. So, you know, and then we have Brazil after that. So, you know, I at this point, I don't know the Reynoso blueprint. So I guess it begins right now.
And that's fair. I think along the lines of what you said, like, I'm giving him a chance. This is clean slate. This is the qualifiers, and this is where we actually begin to, I guess, judge him.
Yeah.
Now, Peru have finished in that fifth spot the last two campaigns, as you mentioned earlier. Realistically, where do you see this team, just on paper, right? Realistically, where could you see this team finishing off in 2025, 2026, right, when we end this cycle?
Okay, so to answer that question, let's look at everybody else first, right? Because, you know, from a value perspective, it's sad to say, but it's a reality, because I think the Peruvian domestic leagues needs to improve and stuff. But from a value perspective, Peru is in the bottom three with Venezuela and Bolivia. Then after that, there's a little, but that's just a fact. Statistically, from what the value of a player is to international markets, Peru is in that bottom three. That doesn't mean that there's no talent or, you know, a will to win. And like you said, getting that intercontinental spot, maybe even higher. But let's answer that question to everything else. Argentina, the World Cup champions, I see them winning this whole thing, this table. Again, they'll have some issues and stuff, but I think overall they're good. Brazil, it's an interesting one to figure out because they have an interim manager, but they're still Brazil. There's just too much talent for them not to qualify. To win the group, I don't know about the table, but they'll definitely get out of there. Now, here's when it gets tricky. Uruguay with Marcelo Bielsa, who I think are going to be a force to be reckoned with. There is no better national team that suits better Marcelo Bielsa than Uruguay, and vice versa. So I think Uruguay are going to be a force to be reckoned with. Colombia, Diego, I think from what I've seen ever since they failed to make the World Cup, are looking excellent. And they're also going through a period of change. And they have a lot of young players that are coming through. So they worry me a little bit as well in terms of, can we overcome them? Paraguay is an interesting one because they do have some great players, specifically that play in Europe and beyond. You know, Almiron, and Ciso is injured right now, but he's excellent. So we'll have to see about that. So I think overall, the table will look as it always looks, right? Argentina and Brazil fighting, Uruguay probably pushing, Colombia, I think, will do a thing. So that's 4 guaranteed. After that, my friend, you know, Chile, again, are also going through similar things that Peru are going through, where, like, you know, they can't over-rely too much anymore on the likes of Alexis Sanchez or Vidal and stuff. So they need to get those young players. They do have some young, talented Chilean players that are coming through. But is it enough, right? So I think because there's 6.5 spots, 6 gets you in, it would be a travesty not to get that intercontinental spot, because you're really only fighting against the likes of 3 nations who I think we can compete very well, which is, oh, and I didn't even mention Ecuador. I'm sorry to say. Ecuador worry me because they're very talented, but because Gustavo Alfaro didn't renew his contract, and now they have Sanchez Vaz, who managed the Qatari national team. Is that too much for him to enter a region that he knows nothing about? Or not nothing, but like from a managing perspective, it might be interesting to see. And also they begin with a -3 because of the Brian Castillo situation. So Ecuador, but I still give it to them. So again, long answer. I think that because we have that extra added spot in the 6.5, I think Peru has a chance, and we're fighting against the usual suspects. But I think it would be a travesty if we're not even considered for that final 6th spot, because I think with Bolivia, Venezuela still struggling as well, and Chile going through a transition, it's between us and the team we're about to face, Paraguay, I think. So I'm confident, but I need to see the Reynoso system, man. I need to see what they're all about.
I agree 100%. I think if we were talking, and if Gareca was still coach, I think most of us would be like, you know what, we're going there and we're going to do our thing against Paraguay because he's gotten the best of Paraguay. with Reynoso, I'm not sure because again, there's a lot of insecurities as to what we're playing, how we're playing, who's playing. So we'll have to see there. Luis Miguel, I want to thank you for your time because I know you got a lot of stuff to do. You got to get back to that call with Messi. And
he keeps calling, man.
He keeps calling.
Geez. I know.
I'm sorry, Messi. I'm sorry. We'll reach back out. So thank you. I want to let everyone know where they can find you, where they can see your work. And again, thank you. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, brother. And continue on the great work that you keep on doing 100%. It's always good to see Las Causitas doing well. It's, represent Peru. I love it. ESPN, ESPN FC, ESPN Deportes, LM Echegaray on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. And Luis M. Echegaray on Instagram, YouTube, ESPN FC, of course. So, if you Google my name, which is obviously essentially unique, you can find all my stuff, but I really appreciate it. A final thought, by the way, I really want to see Miguel Trauco and Marcos Lopez start.
Okay.
I want to see that. I don't know whether it's like one or the other, but I think that Trauco has rejuvenated himself with San Jose Earthquakes. I think it's worthy of mention, but that was my only final thought. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Arriba Perú, carajo.
There we go. There we go. You guys heard it here first. That's Peru right now for y'all. We got the other 9 nations. So don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.